When we look back at the history of PlayStation, it's fascinating to see how every generation brought major changes to gaming. From the original PlayStation all the way to the PlayStation 5, each console has its own identity and legacy. But here's an interesting question. Out of all PlayStation generations, which one brought the biggest change? Let's start with the original PlayStation. This was the moment Sony completely disrupted the gaming industry. At the time, gaming was still heavily associated with 2D graphics and cartridge-based systems. Then the PlayStation arrived with CD technology and fully 3D experiences that felt revolutionary for the era. Games like Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy VII showed players that video games could be much more than simple entertainment. They could deliver cinematic storytelling, emotional moments, and immersive worlds. The PS1 laid the foundation for PlayStation's rise as one of the biggest brands in gaming. Then came the PlayStation 2, and this is where PlayStation became a global phenomenon. The PS2 wasn't just successful, it completely dominated the gaming industry. The jump from PS1 to PS2 delivered a massive improvement in graphics, animation quality, and overall game scale. Virtual worlds felt bigger, more detailed, and far more alive than ever before. But the PS2 had another advantage. It doubled as a DVD player. At a time when standalone DVD players were still relatively expensive, the PS2 became the centerpiece of many living rooms. For some people, buying a PS2 wasn't just about gaming, it was also an affordable way to watch movies. This was the generation where gaming truly entered the mainstream. However, the most significant shift arguably began with the PlayStation 3. The PS3 generation marked the transition from classic gaming into the modern gaming era. Online multiplayer became increasingly important. Game updates became a normal part of the experience, and production values reached new heights. This was also the generation that blurred the line between video games and movies. Titles like The Last of Us and Uncharted 2. Among Thieves demonstrated that games could deliver storytelling and presentation on a level comparable to Hollywood productions. At the same time, this era introduced many trends that still define gaming today. Downloadable content, digital purchases, and microtransactions began to gain momentum, changing not only how games were played, but also how they were sold and supported. Next came the PlayStation 4, which many players consider one of the most comfortable and balanced console generations ever. By this point, developers had mastered modern hardware design, and Sony's first-party studios were operating at their peak. The PS4 delivered critically acclaimed exclusives such as God of War, Marvel's Spider-Man, and Ghost of Tsushima. The PlayStation ecosystem felt mature, polished, and highly refined. What's interesting, though, is that the leap from PS3 to PS4 didn't feel as revolutionary as previous transitions. Instead of completely reinventing gaming, the PS4 focused on perfecting and improving ideas that had already been introduced during the PS3 era. And now, we arrive at the PlayStation 5. From a technological perspective, the PS5 is incredibly powerful. Its ultra-fast SSD drastically reduces loading times, visuals are more realistic than ever, and overall performance represents a major technical achievement. Yet many gamers feel that this generation hasn't delivered the same sense of transformation seen in earlier eras. One reason is that graphics have already reached a point where improvements are becoming less dramatic to the average player. The difference between PS1 and PS2, or PS2 and PS3, was immediately obvious. The jump from PS4 to PS5, while impressive, is often more subtle. Another factor is cross-generation support. Many major PS5 titles have also been released on PS4, making the boundary between generations feel thinner than ever before. So, which PlayStation generation brought the biggest change? If we're talking purely about technological innovation, many people would point to the transition from PS1 to PS2, or perhaps from PS2 to PS3. But if we're talking about the biggest change in the way people experience games, the PS3 generation may have the strongest case. That was the moment gaming changed forever. Online connectivity became standard, game updates became expected, digital content became common, and the industry started moving toward the ecosystem we know today. In the end, every PlayStation generation played an important role in shaping modern gaming, but perhaps the biggest evolution was never about graphics or hardware alone. It was about how the way we play, buy, and experience games changed over time.